So welcome to episode 5, where we talk about diversity in media and media more broadly. And what a big topic area and another big conversation where we talk about different things to do with policy and practice, but process and how we understand the process behind including diversity in a helpful way.
Yeah, and how that actually happens behind the scenes, and how the work doesn't begin in casting. It happens actually like way before that, from like when people think about when they're about to produce a story and all those biases that come into play in the decision-making process from the very beginning all the way to the end.
Totally, and how that plays out. So yeah, let's get into it.
Hello and welcome. This is episode 5 of Decolonise Me, and today we'll be talking about media in Australia, media representation in Australia. And my name is Happy.
Hi, my name is Jioji.
And we are joined today by a very special guest, newly minted, Dr. Pearl Tan.
Thank you very much. It's a month fresh, so it's still novel, very novel.
So we're gonna insert it all the time.
Thank you.
Just like, enjoy it. So, yes, Dr. Pearl, can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you've been doing, about your research about media in Australia?
Okay, so I'll start just by positioning myself. So
Yes.
I was born in Wajak in Perth in Western Australia. I'm Chinese, Malaysian, Australian. And my parents immigrated in like the mid 70s. And so immigrant background. And that I think has led to, in Australia, in Perth, it was very racist when I grew up. There was kind of the Australian nationalist movement with Jack Van Tongeren. So there was anti-Asian signs everywhere growing up. And it was very much like I grew up in a assimilate kind of, that's the way I absorbed it as a kid. So flash forward to the work that I do now, I think it's been quite a journey of sort of acceptance and realization that I don't need to do that assimilating piece and that there are other ways of being, and a lot of self-reflection and a lot of kind of unpacking so much about myself and in some ways decolonizing myself, right?
Yeah.
And so that then I got into acting. So I moved over to Sydney to study at drama school. And when I came out, found myself very typecast. And then I had an undergrad in filmmaking. So I sort of went, let me start making stuff instead of being the actor waiting for someone to cast me in a role and being cast in either not cast or cast in very stereotypical roles. So yeah, that led me down this path of sort of accidentally falling into advocacy and diversity, and then doing more and more until my PhD research, which was looking at the experience of diverse creatives in the screen industry. And my research specifically looks at Australian fiction, so drama comedy, funded by state and federal funding to be made. So yeah, that's where my work currently sits.
There's a lot there.
Oh.
I was just like, yes. Shout out to all the migrants. Yeah, represent. And I was like, yes, this whole thing about this pressure to assimilate. And I think that's still there. That's still there, present in many generations of migrants and that need to assimilate.
This feeling of being, if we're talking about decolonization, like of being colonized and a colonizer in this like uncomfortable kind of space where you move every day, every moment, every conversation. Yeah, you're in a different position. So yeah, I find that really interesting.
Totally. So we've already really started our
Yeah.
conversation. Don't apologize. You can see how rich this conversation is going to be. So as we know, there's 3 parts to our shared conversation. The first part is deconstruct, where we're going to strive to understand the topic area, which is media. So we're going to talk about that first. The second part then is to decolonize. So how do we see this area of media differently, and sort of explore the possibilities beyond what we might know now? And then the third part of our conversation is to disrupt, where you're going to issue us with a challenge and we're going to come up with some practical strategies and or ways that we might be able to decolonize ourselves ongoingly when it comes to this particular topic area of media.
Yeah. So the first question then about the landscape, I guess, of Australian media. For me, I think I want to know, based on your work, what are sort of the predominant narratives that we see on screen that are kind of like the mainstream ideas being produced or being funded? Like, what are these narratives that we have?
Yeah, I think there's a plethora of stereotypes, and I won't go down that direction because there's just so many, right? But what I will talk about is maybe how we've gotten here and maybe why it's like that. So I think what generally happens is when we don't have people from identity or community authoring, and authoring is, you can unpack that word as well, stories, or having the power in the storytelling or initiating those stories, then you're often seeing or dominant people in with identities, or the typical dominant forces, creating characters and narratives about more diverse people from more diverse and First Nations backgrounds. And so then what happens is it becomes very derivative, because they do their research and go, oh, let's go watch all the other things that have been made about this culture. Oh, okay, there's not much. So I have these 1, 2, 3 references, and then they'll use that as the information to then create these new characters. So you've got then layers of stereotypes on layers of stereotypes, and then we fall into these kind of tropes and typical characters. Chimamanda Adichie's, I think, yes, it talks about the
writer,
the power or the problem of stereotypes, and how it's not that it's not real, it's that there's just one single story. And I think this is adding in more detail to what she says, which is what I see in the Australian landscape.
And when you say, let's say, are we talking about also like decision makers on top? Like, does it really, because there is really a lack of BIPOC people in decision making roles, like what roles would this traditionally be? Like executive producers, or is it from the funding bodies? Does it start in the funding bodies, or does it where does it kind of start?
I kind of see it everywhere, because people talk about gatekeepers, and it's very easy to like finger point and go, oh, it's that person at that network, that's the commissioner, or that's the development executive. It's them. They said no to my project, and so they hate all diversity, right? So like we kind of get that a little bit, and I get it. It's so vulnerable to make work. Any kind of creative work is like you're putting yourself out there, and that is anyone from any background, that's how we feel. But I think there's lots of mini gatekeepers along the way, and it's more to do with an approach necessarily than an identity, because there are some great allies out there, but when I say it's about approach, it can be about, like I saw an amazing Diversity Arts Australia ran a session recently about decolonising, and they were saying that they didn't really like the word decolonising, and they preferred for them indigenising, because it was not a response to, like, for them decolonisation was still centering the colonisers, because they're pushing against something, and so they were talking about indigenising. So in this way, I think if someone approaches, and they were saying, if someone approaches you to tell an Indigenous story, they were all First Nations people, then it's not created by, initiated by Indigenous people, then you instantly have a problem. And it's like, and if people from diverse backgrounds don't approach you, to do things then and tell stories, then it becomes challenging. So for me, I see frequently the thing I dislike the most is leveraging. So people from dominant backgrounds going, there seems to be more and more targets or requirements or guidelines. And so in order for me to get funding, I need to work with people from diverse backgrounds. So I'm now, who do I know? I'm going to create this whole story about Filipino people. And then I'll call Happy and go, hey, do you want to work on this thing? And it's like, no, Happy's got her own ideas. Happy's got cool stuff to tell and do. She doesn't necessarily need to jump on your idea. And so everything from independent creators thinking in that way through to the systems at play saying, here are the targets and here are the things, and we expect you to have someone with lived experience and from the background to be part of your creative core team. But we're not going to provide any support really for to make sure that's safe, for production companies who are established and don't have those people in their teams. We'll just say it's a requirement now. So they are struggling as well. And then, so it's all the way up, and it becomes very difficult to kind of finger point one thing. I see it much more as a systemic issue.
It's interesting because a lot of the stuff that I've been exploring over the many years also is around the policy approach that's taken by peak bodies like Screen Australia and their ability to even create strategies. I just want to unpack that further. What are some of the policies and or strategies that places like Screen Australia and other peak bodies in the art space have put in place to help or maybe even possibly hinder or not be so helpful? I know from my own experience, one of them is around this quota approach that, we have this percentage of the population, so the content that we fund is this percentage of the funding. But that goes beyond the purpose, right, of being able to create content that is driven by a narrative from that diverse perspective that other people can engage with, irrespective of how much of the population is of that. So tell us more around some of those policies that exist and how they may impact on the practices.
Yeah, so I think I focused in a similar way to you because I'm not a policy machine. I can't rattle off policies.
Not a policy machine.
But I do like kind of commenting on policy and looking at it. But I think
likewise.
I think that was one of the key things for me as well, is the box ticking thing. So looking at the way and look, the box ticking thing has its place, because if we don't have a baseline, so for years they were like, well, how do you know that it's not diverse? And we were all going,
look,
are you kidding me? And that was almost like the wall and the barrier that they would put up, because they knew it was really hard to get that data, right? And then so everyone was like, get the data. So now they're like, we've got the data. And everyone's like, yeah, it's pretty bad, right? And they're like, yeah, it's pretty bad. And then that was 2016 Seeing Ourselves report. The 2023 report that came out as a follow-up to that so many years later showed very little movement.
Did it get worse?
No, it's slight increments across different ones. I think LGBTQIA representation went up the most, but in terms of BIPOC, in terms of disability is the most atrocious. The numbers were still pretty bad. And so they were like, we put, and in between 2016 and 2023, there were so many programs and initiatives putting the pressure back on individuals to go, the reason maybe why we're in this position is because there's no one from that background who is good enough. So let's train them up. Let's put the emphasis back on them and create these programs for you all so that you can apply and do all these entry-level things and there's no real pathways forward for that. When, again, systemically, you're going, well, you can train all these people. If you don't give them a job, then
that's
after
right. Where
that,
the
if you don't program them,
if you don't program them, you don't commission them, you don't take on board their stories, then it becomes challenging. So the counting thing was a big thing that I was looking at, and I tried to flip the lens, which I think we talk about in the second section of this, in terms of going, well, what is the experience of people who are ticking boxes and live through that, and this whole thing of the institutions promoting themselves as being very pro, as being very whatever words they use at the time, being very diverse or inclusive, or, decolonize is creeping in there. Authentic is another, big word to unpack. What does that mean and how is it measured? There's so many different buzzwords and ways that the landscape shifts and changes. And we're in a spot now where we're a bit like, we don't really know what to call it. We're all still kind of there working in it. I'm still like, I'm still doing diversity, but what's it going to be called? What's the label for it in
the next 5 years?
Few years time? Yeah. I don't know, but really equality, justice, it's like.
I've heard vibrancy.
Vibrancy.
Wow.
Contribute to the vibrancy of the city.
Wow.
I'm vibrant.
You are vibrant.
Yeah.
That's so interesting, because I've heard a lot of those sort of things come through in conversations that I've had working in this sector as well. Even from a casting point of view, people are like, we did want to cast someone of diversity, but they're not out there. It goes to the idea that, they are out there. You just haven't intentionally created either characters or narratives within your particular output that actually reflects such people genuinely. Is that part of the issue as well in the current context of what we understand media to be? Is that people fail to understand that there is capability and capacity out there?
I think there's two things to that. There is definitely capability and capacity out there, and there are skilled, trained, amazing people from many, many different backgrounds. Another finger point is often at the training institutions, and often they are graduating people. So you can find them, and you can find natural talent if you do. There's a lot of, street casting and finding the right person to play the character who really sits in that pocket and really needs very little direction. They need to kind of play themselves. And so you're going out and just finding that character in the real world. That takes time and that takes resources. But the other thing, though, that I think is more interesting is the stuff that happens behind the scenes in terms of when you are doing that casting, when you are getting that person on board, what are you doing to support them so that they can succeed? Because it is a very weird thing to turn up and do an audition or to send in a self-tape or to know what are they looking for, or what is it to be directed and how am I meant to respond to that? So if you're getting people who don't have training or who are fresh out of training and still learning on the tools, what are you doing to support them? Is there mentorship? Are there resources? Is there more time? Because if we don't do that, then what we do to add a layer to it is we get someone in and we go, okay, we found the person either, in community or someone fresh out of drama school or whatever it is. We put them in the role and then they struggle because they haven't been given the support, because it's such an unusual thing to be doing. Then the work goes out to the world and everyone goes, well, that was diversity casting. Look at them, they're not very good. And then you set them up to fail, and that person won't necessarily have the opportunity to learn on the tools. How many times do we see people who aren't from diverse backgrounds, just like someone just goes, oh, you're cool. You're a mini me. I'm gonna look after you, mentor you, and give you opportunities. And then that person flourishes. It's there's so many different elements to it as to why we keep perpetuating the same cycles and having the same kind of problematic narratives. Yeah.
And I think, sorry, just to add on that, I think the one thing that annoys me about that, it's as if I'm the problem.
Yes.
When it's really like, I come into, an audition room and then the person behind the camera or the producer who's there, they don't speak Filipino. And then my lines are in Filipino. So it's like, how can you direct me or tell me what to do or how to improve the, like to do another take when you actually don't have the competency.
The knowledge.
Like to do that. So then that's already, step one. That's in the audition process. That's probably not even step one. That's like far further along in the process. So for me, it's like, if in the audition they can't get it right, and I'm already feeling like that, and I'm like, oh, this is so weird. Like, what more in the set?
Completely.
And I can just imagine, like, wow, what a nightmare to go
And acting is with like every cell of your body, right? Like in order, if you've got any part of you that's pulling back or feeling unsafe or going, oh, that's a bit weird, and your little negative self-critic, what are you doing? Right? Then suddenly you're like, you can't act, you forget your lines, you can't concentrate, you're not listening, you're not doing, which you need to be acting to do, and you don't do a good performance.
Yeah.
So it's like, no wonder they think, well, they're not very good, are they?
Yeah.
Because you're just like, well, you have to think about the environment you're creating
Yes.
for everyone coming
Yeah.
in. Maybe if like every single person you get in isn't very good, what's
Yeah.
the common denominator?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Is it you? Is it a you problem or a me?
Yeah.
Totally. And you had me triggered at self-tape audition.
Oh, sorry. So sorry.
No.
Trigger warning.
I'm here for it all. I've submitted many.
Yeah.
But I agree. It's this idea of you're also trying to figure out what they want and whether they understand your expression.
Yeah.
And so I think this is a nice segue to our second part of the conversation, decolonize, where we're going to further explore how can we see this differently, even from the way in which we may do things in media. So yeah, how can we look at this differently?
Flip the lens.
God, we have to question everything, and you have to question everything in a way where you know that you don't know everything. And so it's this uncomfortable place of like, I think the only way that you can decolonize yourself, decolonize the systems, decolonize your processes is to sit in the discomfort and go, I've got to keep asking everyone around me. Because the other thing is, there is diversity within diversity. So when we say, okay, we're doing this community, that community, and even when you are a part of that community, you're a small part of that community. You don't necessarily know what the lived experience is of someone of a different gender or of a different upbringing or community, or different like kind of area of Sydney, or area of Australia, or whether they migrated, whether they were born here or migrated, and at what age, like. All of those things are nuances, which is actually really exciting for character and story. So I think all the way along, we have to kind of question everything, and we have to remind ourselves that we don't know anything except for the very narrow thing of where we're sitting. We are experts, and we can be experts in our craft. So it's not to say that like, oh, you can't tell any stories and your craft doesn't come into it. So I'm really interested in like, where does your storytelling craft intersect with all these levels of identity and character and narratives and story and stereotypes? Because sometimes someone from a particular background and community can easily perpetuate a stereotype because they've lived through it, and they're like, oh, well, yeah, it is what it is, and that is my lived experience, and that is my worldview, so I'm allowed to tell that story. And then there are going to be other members of that same community that they represent and are a part of going, why did you make that? So it's just so complicated. And it's not to say it's a landmine and you should never do that work unless you can only ever write yourself. It's just saying that question your processes, be really open to finding new, exciting things, complexities, because that is the part that we're bringing to storytelling that is really exciting, the parts that haven't been told yet, right? Like, even if you say all storytelling is these 3 or 7 stories or whatever it is, like the parts that we're adding to it, the nuance that we're adding to it, the exciting, fun part is the parts that we've lived that we haven't seen on screen before, or we've seen in a particular way in screen before. And that's what makes you unique. That's what makes you that's what makes your work exciting.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot there. And I think very much so on the, even like me, for example, I'm Filipino, and the Philippines itself is very diverse. And my experience of the Philippines and being Filipino is very different from every other Filipino that's there. And I think, yes, coming to terms, like as a creative, coming to terms with that and understanding also your positionality, the privilege that you have, and rather than deny it or pretend that you're not that, I think like embrace it, accept it. Like that's who you are, and that is the point of view that you have, and use that to develop your voice.
And to go back to First Nations principles, like that is relational. And then if you really sit in that and you really listen, then that's exciting, because new things come from that, new kind of spaces in between, kind of are born from that. And I think that's really interesting.
Totally. So what I'm hearing so far is you've got to check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Totally. That. And I think it's because it's this idea, right? I really love what you're saying there in the sense of you can still come with your craft and your skills, but it's sort of making sure that you allow others to then come to be at the table even, right? And bring their skills and their craft to then work together, as opposed to you've got to take it on you. It's almost like you've got to appropriate this diversity. No, it's about actually exactly being relational and working together to create something that is wonderful.
Yeah, love it.
It's really interesting. I think let's further explore casting. So I've been involved previously with a lot of the Paul Fennick stuff over the many years. Shout out to Paul Fennick. So Fat Pizza, Swift and Shift, Howzo. So I was involved in those series back in the day. And I had I enjoyed being involved in that because I was playing characters that were driven by me, and a lot of we had a lot of opportunities to improv and do that sort of stuff. So we were owning stuff. When Houses came out, there was a big uproar, right? This idea that, oh my gosh, these people are documentary filmmakers, but it was satire. And one of the things I do admire about Paul is that he will always get that person from that lived experience or diversity to come and play those characters and potentially play with those characters. But some people will be like, but no, you're perpetuating the stereotype. Mm-hmm. So how do we find that balancing act, especially from diverse backgrounds, around representation and ensuring that people understand what we're trying to do here as well?
Mm. It's interesting because I think as an actor, you come in, your craft is to, take the words off the page or to impro and be in that character and embody that character, and bring it to life. Now, your job is not to be a consultant for the work, but often actors are put in a position where they're like, would you say this? And you're like, well, it's not me, it's the character. And we kind of get lumped with the same thing. And then your brain is going, I am critiquing and analyzing as a consultant and giving feedback at this level, bringing my life into it to go, well, in my family, and doing all this kind of stuff. So I think what happens quite often is that actors are put in uncomfortable positions without even realizing, and actors want to work and they love the craft, right? And they want to do it more. So they're going to be like, oh yeah, sure. Yeah. If I get some, that's me building my character. I get to have some say. I get to have sort of a pass on this script, and be able to contribute in that way. So I think that's one of the issues. And what happens then is there's a thing called a defensive truth as well, where people of color, people from diverse backgrounds are put into a cast or put into a writer's room, but don't really have any decision-making power about how that how they're directed, how that is edited, how that is marketed, all of those things. And then when there is any criticism, in your case, I think it's different because it's created by also people from the same community. But more dominant creators can then say, oh, no, but we had so-and-so in the writer's room, so it's fine. And we had so-and-so, and they were authentically cast, so it's fine. How dare you say that about them? When actually sometimes those people are going, I said that in the writer's room and they didn't listen to me. I noted on set, I felt so uncomfortable on set, but there was no opportunity to say, can I change this? Because that's a bit over explaining and inauthentic, I think there's a lot of other things at play as well.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to that whole, are you set up to succeed? And what is the room set up for? So if it's not for me, if this room is not for me, for genuine representation or real characters that represent who I am, then who is this room set up for? What is it set up for?
Yeah, I agree. And I've been involved in that similar sort of thing, been in writers' rooms where I've gone in and I've given feedback and it's sort of changed. And thankfully I'm in a position of I'd like to think in my career where I can actually say things, especially because of my academic background as well, and go, no, I don't think this makes sense from a character point of view, let alone from a social point of view. We need to tweak this. But you're right. It's about how do we ensure that people who are in those spaces and their feedback is genuinely incorporated, and then it follows through to the actual product itself. Because a lot of the time it can be tokenistic. Yeah. So I think that's a big part, isn't it? Thinking of this differently. Can we also talk about how important it is to also ensure that we're not just seeing diversity on camera, we actually are incorporating their genuine narratives in stories.
Yes, and then that is the kind of like the more visible and obvious ones are like who is the director, writer, producer, like the core creative teams, who is cast, and what is their portrayal of that particular character and their identity is kind of more obvious and out there. But we have to kind of dig below the surface and go, what are the processes in the casting? How are people experiencing that? What is happening to people from those communities and backgrounds in behind the scenes? And are they being paid for their work? Are they being credited for their work? Are they being respected in the room? All of these things that kind of dig a little bit deeper behind what is, and because the media is like in popular culture, everyone has an opinion and everyone thinks they know what's going on. You know, if there's a picture of a writer's room, like I find myself on Facebook, any picture now, I'm like, zoom in, how many people of color, you know,
yeah, I'm like that.
And I'm like, is that, that person's ambiguous, you know, and then I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Like, this is not a good metric. This is not a good way. It's making me paranoid. Like, it's not the way to do it. There are other things that we need to consider, and you do need to then go, what can I do in my creative world to make sure that I'm not operating like that?
So process.
Yes.
The process is so important. Yeah. And what are you actually doing to engage diversity meaningfully? That's awesome. Yeah.
I also just wanted to just quickly check in, because a while ago you mentioned the term defensive truth. Can you just define it quickly, just so?
Yeah. The academic is Martin. Maybe I can send it to you. You can put it in the show notes or something.
Yes,
okay, cool. And he talked about they looked at the FX series Pose, and there was hang on, am I mixing up two studies? I'll correct it in the show notes. But there was a study where they looked at there was a walkout at Netflix from transgender employees and allies, and they were treated quite poorly, and they sort of analysed their experiences and contrasted it with what was presented as kind of PR and marketing. I think I am mixing up studies, but defensive truth is pretty much what I was saying before about saying that this truth of having a diverse person in the writer's room or on cast is a truth I can use to rebut and counteract any criticisms.
Right. Yeah. So using that as your kind of shield, like, oh no, there was a diverse person in the room, therefore this is diverse.
It's fine.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
look at their appearance.
Isn't that also a logical fallacy? Okay.
Yeah. I have one last quick question before we move on to the challenge in Disrupt. Can we further discuss the idea of intersectional diversity? This idea that people are not just one area of diversity, they may also be diverse based on their age and gender and their class and their religion and their sexuality. And I haven't even said ethnicity yet. So how do we also incorporate that in media?
When you say that's my jam, this is my jam.
Yeah.
Right? So in terms of intersectionality, like that was where I started my research for the PhD, because I won't reveal what the challenge was, because I've decided I'm gonna give that to you as a challenge in my mind as we've been having this conversation. So, but what I will talk about is where and how intersectionality is being used in, I guess in, dare I say, rhetoric from institutions, media institutions at the moment. It's being used in different ways. So really what it is it's looking at power structures and looking at systems. What it's been reduced to, and what I thought it was when I first heard the term, is about individual identity. I am an intersectional person. I am, a queer Asian Australian woman, and so therefore I am intersectional. That is not what it's actually about, and that is not where the history of it comes from. So nowadays, though, because it's become another buzzword, kind of alongside diversity. So it's diversity, inclusion. Oh, and we're doing it in an intersectional way, right? And so then when you look at the different reports, so I'll contrast two reports. One is the Screen Australia 2023 report. Now, they tried to do intersectionality by looking at kind of subsections. So they counted all the heads and looked at the percentages. And then there was these little breakout boxes which would say, out of this community, there is this percentage of them who are this community. And then the numbers would be like these teeny tiny numbers, and they would be like, aha, we're intersectional and we're counting intersectionally, right? But it doesn't really do anything. We kind of go, well, yeah, of course, if that's low and that's low, it's going to be even lower, here. They do a better job in this kind of second part of the report where they do interviews, and there are quotes from anonymous interviews where they speak to the systemic barriers in an intersectional way, but they actually don't label it as such, So it's kind of interesting. The contrasting report is from the ACS, which is the Australian Cinematographers Society. The report's called A Wider Lens, and it's about the experience of female cinematographers, and it's a harrowing read, and it's an amazing report, and I definitely think you should take a look at it. And it is amazing in the way it considers intersectionality and then makes recommendations using the framework to go, not just we need more intersectional people, we need to consider intersectionality, but here are things we can do, tangible things, because we've used the framework and the thinking of intersectionality in the way it was intended. It's arguable. Then here are some recommendations. So it's a really robust and a fantastic kind of approach that I really recommend people take a look at.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for unpacking the different ways in which intersectional theory and intersectional identities is understood. So intersectional theory, people like Collins and Hooks and Crenshaw, they talk about this oppressive structure in society and how different intersectional identities may be oppressed, and then intersectional identities is then looking at different parts of your identity. So yeah, there's different ways in which we might explore those different things. We got very deep all of a sudden, didn't we?
But he's like academics. Give me the report.
We're nerding out. Sorry,
we are nerding out. But it's important to look at those nuances in the theory and the practice, which actually leads us now to the third section of the challenge, because we're going to be now looking at the practice and we're going to disrupt. So
okay,
yes, I'm excited for the challenge.
Well, it is a big challenge, and you don't need to completely answer it. It's impossible to completely answer.
Oh no, I will do it.
Okay, all right,
I will do it. Just kidding.
I'm excited, but it is around intersectionality, because it is that thing of, we say, so now in order to get funding for your work, it is that thing of we expect to see in the core creative team someone with lived experience. So how then can you create work that is intersectional? Like if we were going to be in housemates comedy, right? Like we live together, and that's gonna and like say there was not just us, say it was like a dormitory type thing, right? And it wasn't just the three of us or younger characters of ourselves. There was like 10 people, that is an ensemble cast that is super intersectional. How would you go about proving the case that you are the right people to tell this story and that an intersectional story can be told? So it's not just your community
it's like a mix.
Yeah, I can see you both. It's mixed. How would you go about creating that or applying for funding for that?
I feel like we have to act this out.
I know. Well, where there's three of us.
We could pretend that we're at the coffee table in the house.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
We could potentially.
Are we really acting?
I don't know.
We have lights, so I can use this as my self-tape.
Maybe it's more. Okay, I'll help you out.
Okay.
What discussion? If you two were wanting to make this, what kinds of conversations would you have?
No, I understand. Yeah.
Right,
awesome.
right,
Do you want to go first, and then I can go? Or do you want me to go first?
It's a hard
You have
one.
something?
Potentially.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. So how would I meaningfully incorporate intersectional characters in and across the actual show?
And I guess we should define multiple intersectional identities.
Identities, that's right.
And the group is intersectional identity, like with each other.
Yeah.
Okay,
And it's really interesting because I think when we think about, again, the theory of intersectionality, we're also looking at power and privilege and how that plays out as well. So we can try and incorporate that as well. Hence why it was probably good that we did the unpacking of that. So what I would probably do is am I the producer? Am I the writer?
Be whatever you want.
Oh, I'm gonna be the showrunner.
I'm
gonna do it all.
casting myself.
I'm the casting director, the agent, it all. So what I would probably do is I would genuinely sit down with people from those diverse areas and backgrounds, and I would create scripts and characters that would reflect the different lived experience of those particular people. And it's really interesting because I think sometimes when people write things, they're like, okay, we've got to make sure that we have, this person of color who's queer, that lives in public housing, that has a disability, right? And it's like, yes, that such people exist, but how do we make sure that their narrative is genuinely put into the story in a way that actually is genuine? It's not necessarily making it make sense, but it actually is part of the story that they're able to actually do these things without being labeled. I think that's the thing, right? We need to move beyond the stereotypes and the tropes and the labels, and we need to make sure that the writing genuinely and generally reflects those areas of diversity in a helpful way. So I think that's what I'd be doing. I'd be getting people in the writer's room that would be reflective of those lived experience and living experience, with view that we would create a show that was reflective of those areas in a helpful way. That's my answer.
You can grade us after.
It's
been so nice.
Totally, but I'm happy to receive feedback before.
I guess the question is then, how my follow-up question would be, how would you avoid characters who feel very like thin or watered down or generalized? Like, how do you give those characters some bite and some flaws, and which elements of the characters would you make storylines or part of the story world? So I'd be interested in, you don't have to answer it now, there's no
that's
but they would be my follow-up question.
I love that. And I think that's the thing. If it was a series, then that sort of stuff would play out, right? It wouldn't be just, this is the point of this character now, haha, they're queer and they're also this. Like, it's literally, how does this play out in a genuine way across the broader show, the series, as opposed to, we're making this episode about them doing this, and that just stays as their identity throughout the actual show. So I agree with you. I think it's intentionally then looking at how do those narratives play out across what you're putting together. But I love that.
That's great. I love it.
Thank you, Dr. Tan.
Thank you very much for your very intellectual question.
So you happy gearing yourself up.
This is like beauty contest Q&A. So for
world
me,
peace.
Okay. I think one thing for me when you were asking us the question, what came into my mind was actually finding the right setting for whatever this story is. I choose setting because we see, for example, Western Sydney. When we think of Western Sydney, we're like, oh, that's where all the brown folks are. And we think that the characters are all just these kind of characters. But really, there are white people in Western Sydney. and I think like the experience of people there are also very different to the how we stereotype them and kind of so I think so what I'm saying is, like, there are already settings in our everyday life where this happens, where these people all meet, like one thing that I thought of was people who work in event cinema. That's like a mixed bag of people right away. And then you have hospitals, you have public transport, you see people walking in trains. Like, there are certain trains that I ride, and then I know, okay, in this line, I know that the voiceover here is gonna be a Filipino voiceover, and then you see the different, safety workers. Some of them are white, some of them are Asian background. So I mean, what I'm saying is, I think these places already exist. Maybe we just don't see it, or every time it's depicted in the media, it's always depicted in a certain way. So, like, for example, I'm gonna use again Filipinos as my kind of case study. Like, how many medical dramas and comedies do we see where there is not a single Filipino? And we all know that is completely false. We own the medical system of the world. So I think it's like those intersections and like people coming together, that already happens. And you see it, restaurants, everywhere, households. I think that's a crucial thing, finding the right setting. Like, where would these people all be naturally, that we don't necessarily get to observe, but then when you watch it, you're like, oh yeah, actually I do see a mix of people there. And then second, I guess, having relationships where they are peers. So that is one thing also that I find. It's always a transactional, or there's always in a setting of hierarchy. I have never really seen like a group of friends, like genuine friendships. And that, again, that exists. There are friend groups where it's all a mix of people. But we don't see that. And I think there's something in that relationship between peers that will really bring out naturally all these characteristics and nuances of characters. And then last, I think also being mindful of the point of view in which it's being told. So this is not me plugging my play, but I think
second episode that she's doing this. I'm here for it all, by the way.
Yeah,
love it.
I think it's so that I started my play is about international aid. And again, when you think of international aid, you always see white aid workers working in the United Nations, but it's like the aid world is super mixed, right? And it's like, how come these international stories are always told by white folk? What about the people who are supposedly the beneficiaries of this aid? What do you think our experience is of the aid that you're delivering to our country? And that was one big thing why I wrote it, because I was so sick and tired of seeing, like, when we think international, why is it always white? Why do we never see a brown aid worker or a local aid worker who's working on the ground? So I think that experience, using that setting, a familiar setting that we know, and then just shifting the perspective. Like, well, this story is going to be told in a different point of view.
And that was Happy Feraren, whose play Saviour is in Griffin Theatre in May 2026. Amazing. Check it out.
Link below.
Can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
Okay. That was great, because I think what was really interesting was you were doing the work, like you were doing the creative work. So in some ways you just kind of spoke about the process and what needed to be done and what needed to be thought about, and then you just started doing it, right? So
I did the homework.
But there are some really tricky things when it comes to like writing story. Then when you say point of view, it's like, oh, okay, well, what is that point of view? How can you be specific and general? Is it anthology? Is it every character has a different episode? Like, what does that kind of look like when it is equal? If you're saying we're showing equal power, to me, I go, oh, that's themes about, I guess, solidarity, which is really interesting. So how do you dramatize that then? How does it become? But I love the thinking of as a starting point to go, what is the story world where, like, what would be believable is a really incredible way of thinking and like demonstrating how you can go about this process and be creative, and it's not kind of shutting it down, it's really opening it up. And it's exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Coming soon, 2028.
How would you answer your question?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right back at you.
So in some ways, this was the project that I did in my PhD. So there is a podcast. I'll do a plug now. There's a podcast called Diversity Work. It's a 5 by 30 minute fictional podcast of a writer's room. So again, a situation where there is a diverse group of people. But what happens is the network is accused of racism. one of the network executives say, no, we're not racist because we have a show in development that ticks all the diversity boxes at once. He's lying. He then, the network then quickly brings together, a very diverse and intersectional writers' room to come up with a pitch that ticks all the diversity boxes at once. The process, so I was really big on process, was making sure that the work was co-created, that it was very intersectional. And the workshops, it was long form improvisation. So all the co-creators had control over their character, the name, how they would respond to things. And I involved them from the very initial kind of workshops and the plotting of the story through to reviewing cuts in post-production, through to involving them in the releases, through to when applying for awards, that they were all listed as co-creators for those, so that if you go to the website and you see we've won a Webby Award, all their names are listed there. We won a Webby Award.
Yes.
We won 2 Webby Awards.
Award winning.
Awesome.
Yeah, so yeah, in some ways, and it was a huge challenge and it was time consuming, and I never would have got funded for it because it so works outside of the systems. So I made it more challenging for you by going, how would you apply? Because it's in some ways, it's, I think currently impossible, but I do know there is work being done behind the scenes to go, what kind of other processes may we, fund? So that's interesting.
Yeah.
And makes me hopeful for the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love that.
You had the best answer.
Yeah, but
you actually did it.
It took me 6.5 years. So it's like I threw it at you. I'm sorry.
No,
You
but
actually practiced
it is a really good podcast. And today was the first time I found out that it was actually improvised. And again, I think we were talking about a while ago, we were talking about how it's about setting up the room, the processes. And I think this is really that. It's testing different ways of creating, different processes of creating. And yes, and I think I highly recommend. I am not biased at all. I'm not saying this because you are in front of me, but it's a really great podcast, Diversity Work. Or diversity. I never know how to pronounce it, if it's diversity or diversity.
It should be said in multiple ways.
Yes.
That's right, in diverse ways.
Yes, in diverse ways. Diversity Work. Prof.
Yeah. I see us working together on a project.
I know.
Watch this space.
I'd love to.
That'd be awesome. And it's on that note, we are going to finish up our conversation and encourage yourselves. How would you answer the question that Dr. Tan asked us in regards to meaningful inclusion of diversity across media? Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Been a wonderful episode.
Thank you. See you.
You've just been watching the Decolonise Media podcast, hosted by Jioji, Ravulo, and Happy Feraren. For more details about the topics discussed, please see the show notes and follow us on all social media platforms.